Story 1. Time does not stop. The speech I am about to give in front of my class, and I am very nervous about, will be over in the next 2 minutes. 2 minutes is 2 minutes. Story 2. To reach certain levels of success, a certain amount of luck is needed. Just do your best and leave the rest to nature. Story 3. There used to be so much death, so much disease, war, and slavery. Enemies would invade and wipe out entire villages. Reading history informs me of how volatile life and peace could be. If your life is relatively peaceful and you are not seeing tanks roll down the streets daily, be grateful. Enjoy life. Love life. Story 4. There are going to be people more successful than you who are much less intelligent than you. This really motivated me to start doing more with my life. Story 5. A park ranger responded when asked why it is so hard to design bear-proof garbage cans. He said there is a surprising amount of overlap between intelligent bears and unintelligent people. Story 6. Fruit flies only live for around 1 to 2 months, and we have about 80 years on this earth. We should make it count and be glad we were not born as fruit flies. Story 7. You can go for a walk today. You might not be able to tomorrow. I had a period when I became extremely sick, and because of this, it became difficult to walk. At that moment, all I wanted to do was go outside and walk. Now I try to go for a walk as often as possible. Story 8. There are more permutations of a deck of cards than atoms in the observable universe. If you ever want to feel special, shuffle a deck of cards thoroughly and presto. You are now the proud owner of that permutation, likely the only one to have ever existed in all of human history before you and any history to come afterward. Story 9. People are living in this world for the first time. You are living in this world for the first time. Your mother, father, and siblings are also living in this world for the first time. Basically, everyone. So let's be kinder. Story 10. You are technically the only thing in the universe you have ever directly experienced. Everything else, people, colors, sounds, even your own body, is your brain interpreting signals. Reality is not what is out there. It is what your brain thinks is out there. Story 11. If you knew how quickly people forget you once you are dead, you would stop caring what they think about you while you are alive. Story 12. Everything we will ever experience is happening on the thin layer of rust around an incomprehensibly large ball of molten iron flying through a mysterious void. Once you start really thinking about what is above the sky, you will realize how small we are and how small our problems are in the big picture. Story 13. Reading that stomach butterflies are actually your body diverting blood from digestion to your muscles for fight or flight made me feel strangely better about anxiety. Like, oh, my body is not broken. It is doing exactly what it evolved to do. Story 14. Learning to care for another thing more than yourself is essential. You could get married, have a child, or get a dog, but until you understand the truth of self-sacrifice, it really does not resonate, and you might be a borderline psychopath. So please find something to love more than yourself at least once. Story 15. The incredible distances between space objects, how enormous some can be, and how insignificant we really are in the grand scheme of it all. See Carl Sagan's pale blue dot. Truly is enlightening. A mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam. Story 16. Seeing the timeline of life on Earth and realizing how short and insignificant humans are in terms of time compared to the damage we have caused. Mother Nature will not die. She will just shake us off like a bad case of fleas. Story 17. Speeding in a car does not, on average, save time. This applies to nearly everything. Take your time to do things right. Story 18. My mother was not an especially progressive woman, but she was quite smart. She was a nurse. 35 years ago, we were having a conversation about transgender people, and she said, and I'm paraphrasing, gender is a single chromosome wrapped up in about 1 billion strands of DNA that scientists are only just beginning to understand. It makes perfect sense to me that people can be born into the wrong bodies. In 2 sentences, she made me realize that we are not always the product of our choices. I won't lie and say that I was forever changed, but whenever I see people denying the existence of transgender people or trying to frame it as a mental health disorder, I always think of her. For anyone who is transgender and reading this, please understand I am not trying to dismiss it as any kind of disorder or abnormality. I am trying to say that I realized you just are. Story 19. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Perspective defines how you perceive the world. Story 20. I once had a stranger compliment my jacket during a really rough week. It was such a small thing, but it stayed with me for days. Later, I read that small acts of kindness have a bigger impact than we think. That really changed how I interact with people. Now I try to pass that forward. Story 21. When I read that the orbit of Mercury around the Sun was found to contradict Isaac Newton's theory of gravity, yet that very theory was used to get us to the moon, despite there being a theory available, Albert Einstein's relativity, that explained Mercury's orbit correctly. It made me realize that science is not about what is true or reality, but rather it is a conceptual framework that allows us to make sense of all our observations. It made me realize that whatever reality is, it is not available to us. Knowledge itself is just a hypothetical framework. If we are brains in vats, we have no idea of the real physical laws. Our knowledge only applies to our in-universe experience. It made me realize that we should not argue with flat earthers or creationists, not just because we think their ideas are wrong, but because they are not science or knowledge. Flat earthers and creationists want to make claims about the nature of reality. Who cares? We cannot know anything about the nature of reality, so it is a moot point. If they want to be relevant, let them propose hypothetical frameworks that are superior to Einstein's or as useful as Newton's theory of gravity. Who cares about reality? Science does not. Knowledge does not. I could go on, but I doubt anyone has read this far anyway. I'm sure I sound like a crank. Story 22. Death is natural. Intentional or unintentional, it is a natural phenomenon in our environment. Intrinsic value. Story 23. The increase in productivity over the past 50 years and the widening wealth gap, with almost no increase in pay for workers, represents stolen wages and lost free time for the common person. Story 24. An old saying goes that time is money, but time is finite and money is infinite. Money can be made, but time can never be bought. The entire point of spending money is to spend time on better things. Story 25. My biology professor told me that my body creates and kills cancer cells multiple times in my life without me knowing it. This made me appreciate how incredible our immune systems are. I have been much more mindful about taking care of my health since then. Story 26. You only get 4,000 weeks on average. That number feels too small. Also, the brain does not distinguish between physical pain and emotional pain. A breakup literally hurts like an injury. Story 27. My mother was not an especially progressive woman, but she was quite smart. She was a nurse. 35 years ago, we were having a conversation about transgender people, and she said, and I am paraphrasing, gender is a single chromosome wrapped up in about 1 billion strands of DNA that scientists are only just beginning to understand. It makes perfect sense to me that people can be born into the wrong bodies. In 2 sentences, she made me realize that we are not always the product of our choices. I will not lie and say that I was forever changed, but whenever I see people denying the existence of transgender people or trying to frame it as a mental health disorder, I always think of her. For anybody transgender who is reading this, please understand I am not trying to dismiss it as any kind of disorder or abnormality. I am trying to say that I realized you just are. Story 28. Difference between 1 million and 1 billion. 1 million seconds equals 11 days, 13 hours, 46 minutes, and 40 seconds. 1 billion seconds equals 31 years, 251 days, 13 hours, 46 minutes, and 40 seconds. Story 29. No matter how bad things are, we are living in the best time in history, especially if you are living in a developed country. Story 30. When I was unwell in the last few years, my friends were there for me. After I got better, I learned that most of them thought they did not do enough. Always make sure to let people know they helped you. Story 31. A seemingly simple fact. Bird feathers have tiny hooks that work like Velcro to keep them together in flight. This puts into perspective how little I actually know about the things that make up my daily life. Story 32. The photo of the pale blue dot that the Voyager satellite took of planet Earth looking like a tiny speck of dust floating through vast space really taught me to take things less seriously. Story 33. Reading that trees in a forest communicate and share resources through an underground fungal network blew my mind. I started looking at forests totally differently on my hikes, like I am walking through nature's social network. It makes me feel bad for the lonely tree in my backyard. Though. Story 34. The fact that our priorities evolve with time and the people we are close to now might not hold the same place in our lives later. Story 35. Platypuses do not have teeth. To chew their food, they put a stone in their mouth that helps them crush it. Story 36. We are all fighting personal battles. Sometimes all a person needs is for someone to listen for a while. Be kind to each other. Story 37. Think of how unintelligent the average person is and realize half of the world is less intelligent than them. I know it is more of a quota but also works as a statistical fact. For a long time, I never understood why so many things were the way they are. Then I realized that much of society lacks education and skills to understand the world, and how the people who do take advantage of that. I am not claiming to be among the most intelligent. I am someone who falls for many things. But even if I am among the 40% least intelligent people, the world makes more sense. Story 38. It's a thought I had one day. It is not what happens to you that defines you, but how you react to it. Story 39. The people at the very top of any field do not know as much as you think. Everything is constantly changing, and it is impossible to know everything. Many people make things up as they go and pretend with confidence and experience to pull it off. Story 40. The International Space Station clumping experiments blew my mind. I had some doubt that random particles in space would attract each other. Not anymore. Story 41. It takes about 8 minutes for a photon to travel from the sun to Earth. However, it can take hundreds of thousands to millions of years for that photon to escape the core of the sun, leave the surface, and leap into space to travel away from the sun. Story 42. I cannot remember where I learned this, but the person you believe yourself to be does not match the person everyone else thinks you are. Each person you have ever met knows a different version of you that is unique to the experiences you have shared. Essentially, I interpreted this as a reminder to be yourself, because everyone experiences a different and unique version of you. They build an image of who they think you are based on those experiences. Story 43. When I learned that ancient Romans used to write complaints about their neighbors on curse tablets and throw them into wells, I suddenly realized that people have not changed at all in thousands of years. I had to laugh because I would totally do the same thing if I lived back then. Story 44. Everyone else has their own thoughts, feelings, memories, dreams, likes, dislikes, personalities, separate and distinct from your own. They all had lives before you showed up, and they all will have lives of their own after you are gone. You know how you feel that things that are important to you are really important? Everyone else feels that way about the things that are important to them. You know how you get hurt because other people had bad days and took it out on you? Everyone else who has had to deal with your bad days has been hurt, too. Your beliefs, your certainties, no matter how firm and strong they are almost always matched, if not exceeded, by someone else who believes in something else. You think your religion or political party or lifestyle is the absolute best. There is someone out there who thinks they have the best religion or political party or lifestyle, and that yours is average. You need to take that into account when dealing with the world. I struggle mightily with that, but I try. I hope you do too. Story 45. Octopuses have 3 hearts and can change color to blend into their surroundings. It is amazing how adaptable they are. Story 46. The things we enjoy and take for granted today were built by the suffering and death of 100 billion people who came before us. Story 47. What got me through college? Don't be scared of the curriculum. Look at the people who are graduating this year and the people who graduated last year. You all got this. Story 48. Others have done terrible things to me for no reason at all. 20 years ago, when I was 16, I was taking shelter from the rain. A group of 6 guys came from the alley across the main street. I hadn't done anything, So I didn't realize what was about to happen and was obviously a bit naive. They were not drunk, but they attacked me for a prolonged period. I remember lying on the ground as they kicked my face and jumped on my head. I prayed that it would just stop. I didn't even care if I died. All I wanted was for the constant blows to end. When I was leaving the hospital late that night, I needed to use the bathroom. It was my first time seeing my reflection in a mirror after the attack. I burst into tears. That moment changed me forever in how I look at people and the world around me. Story 49. There are about 1 billion chemical reactions that happen in a human cell every second, and the average human body has over 30 trillion cells. Story 50. My workplace will always do what is best for them, regardless of how it affects me. Therefore, I should do the same. Story 51. Octopuses have 3 hearts, and when they mate, one literally stops working, which explains dating honestly. Story 52. Cows have best friends and get stressed when they are separated. So enjoy your burger. Story 53. Childhood was simple. Adulting is like playing Guitar Hero on the highest difficulty. Through the fire and flames. Story 54. Humans share about 60% of their DNA with bananas, which completely amazed me about how connected all life is. Story 55. Every human is a universe. There was a school shooting in my state recently, and it was mentioned at my Unitarian Universalist Fellowship during Joys and Concerns. Our minister stated that we must remember that every human is a universe. All their hopes, dreams, fears, harms, mistakes, victories, an entire universe. I have been thinking about it a lot and challenging myself when I judge other people based on one aspect of their life. There is so much unseen and unknown about each other. Story 56. Every person you pass on the street is living a life as vivid and complex as your own, with their own dreams, fears, routines, and memories. It is called Sonder, and once I grasped it, I stopped seeing people as background characters and started seeing them as entire stories walking around. Story 57. It's more of a quote. Think of how unintelligent the average person is, and realize half of them are less intelligent than that. George Carlin. Story 58. I've got a few points. The cotton industry existed and funded the majority of the reason the South used slave labor. The commodity prices fell, making it impossible to afford to grow and pick cotton in the United States and pay for labor. To keep the industry here, they maintained slavery much longer than in the United Kingdom. The number of slaves in the U.S. cotton fields increased after the introduction of the cotton gin because they planted more cotton and needed more pickers to feed the machine that was intended to reduce staffing. Industry and technology do not reduce staffing. They just move the bottleneck in the supply chain either up or down until there is a physical limitation. No more land, no better crops, no more demand, at which point technology can reduce staffing. When Great Britain emancipated their slaves, they had to pay the owners for their lost property. The slaves were not compensated for their lives. Their freedom was considered sufficient. The country went into debt to cover the cost. The United States could not have done the same without going bankrupt. The Civil War made it less of an issue since the Emancipation Proclamation made it possible to free slaves without paying the debt, as they were considered part of a different country. Most large banks and private industry titans in the North and South owned slaves as collateral for debts of Southern plantation owners. So they opposed the Civil War and the freeing of slaves. A significant portion of their portfolios were based on slavery, and they were Northern slave owners by proxy. The average white American family at retirement has $200,000 in net worth. The average black family has $30,000. When people talk about the racial wealth gap, this is part of what they mean. Throughout history, most of us have not gone more than a few years without war, widespread disease, and ultimately large die-offs due to famine, except for the last 50 years in Europe and North America. Now we are dealing with a boredom epidemic, widespread rejection of modern medicine, and a rise of fascism. The generation of stability is coming to an end, and things are going to get hard real quick. Story 59. Everyone has their own perception of the world, which influences their reality. What is real to one person may not be real to another, regardless of scientific evidence. Story 60. Read an answer on Quora a few years ago. I don't remember the author, so I can't give them credit. To paraphrase, imagine there are two boys. They have special lenses in their eyes, which they are not aware of. The first boy's eye lens makes him see the color green as blue. The second boy's lens makes him see green as yellow. They hear the word green in association with what they see, and that becomes the name of the color for them. So, in effect, they are each seeing a different color, blue and yellow, but calling it green. Now imagine all of us have lenses like that for all of our senses, which we are not aware of. These lenses do much more than in the simple example above. All that we perceive as reality is a result of our senses and how we interpret the data we detect. There is no way to know that another person actually sees the same things you are seeing. I always think of this whenever someone is not able to understand something that is obvious to me. Maybe their lenses are just made differently. Story 61. I eat chips, you eat fish. Statistically, we both eat fish and chips. Think of how unintelligent the average person is, and realize half of them are less intelligent than that. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.